the supernatural is something which is discussed. AM 1420 WPSN presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here with you, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. And I almost wish that we need a drop of the Hallelujah chorus, because it's 22:07 and change, and we're on the air.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
It's almost like we're pros at this now.
Yeah. That hasn't happened since we first started.
See, that's what happens. We get hired by the station, and now we have responsibilities. Responsibilities that we apparently didn't take very seriously before. So now we do, and now we're here on time to talk about the paranormal with you, as we are each and every Saturday night. So excited to be back on at our regular time slot. Thank you for playing a day game, Red Sox, and helping us out so that we have a full 2 hours tonight to talk to you with our special guest, Andrea Perron. If you haven't seen the movie The Conjuring, and at this point, who hasn't? When even Matt Costa has seen The Conjuring now, and he never goes to the movies.
I know. I was actually when I was going to watch the movie, I was expecting a crappy crap fest, if that's a good term. But yeah, it was surprisingly good. It's the best horror film that I've seen in a while.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I know that Matt Moniz was a fan of it as well. Moniz, you don't put it up as high as I do in terms of where it ranks in the overall scheme of horror films. I've got it in probably my top 5.
Well, I really like horror. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I think it's very, very, very well done. I just don't think it's an Exorcist type.
Well,
it is up there.
I don't think anything is The Exorcist. I think that's kind of going to hold on to that number 1 spot maybe forever. But this is an excellent film. But what a lot of people don't know is the complete true story of The Conjuring. And we know that the film is based on a true story. We had Keith Johnson in here a few weeks ago telling us the inside story from his perspective. But now we are so excited to be joined by somebody who actually lived through this. And we feel bad that our family had to go through this. But to be able to share this with people, firsthand account from someone who lived it and who is featured in the film and has been just making the rounds and giving so much of her time to sharing this story, we want to welcome into the program Andrea Perron. Good evening, Andrea. How are you? Oh, how about the button? There we go. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Okay, I'm going to run over to Facebook and write technical glitch in the message board.
Well, we can either get on the air on time, or we can be technically sound. It's one or the other.
Oh, okay. It's not both.
No,
okay.
Not at 10 o'clock on Saturday. I was in here at 6 o'clock this morning, and literally I got here like just at 6 o'clock this morning. That's how my day began. So I'm sure it will not end on a good note. But I'm so glad that we finally get to talk with you. And I'm excited about this because we've been chatting back and forth for a few weeks now, and you've been giving me little tidbits about kind of what is the real story beyond just what we saw in the film. And of course, we had Keith Johnson in here, but he can only offer the perspective of being the investigator who was called in first with his pyro organization. This is something that you actually had to endure.
Oh, my. That's a great note to start on. It is. I just came off of an 8-hour road trip, and I think I left you a message about being stoked with caffeine and ready for this. I'm ready for any question that you ask. Excuse me. And I will tell you that even though my sister Cindy objects mightily every time I say this, it was the best 10 years of my life. It taught me everything from day one when I walked into that house carrying a heavy box destined for the kitchen and saw my first full-body apparition and did not know he was a ghost because he was that solid and form. I knew. I didn't know immediately. I knew a few minutes later when Cindy came in the kitchen and said, "Mom, who's that other man in the dining room with Mr. Kenya?" And my mother said, "There is no other man in the dining room." And then Nancy came in and said, that young in the dining room just disappeared. And that happened within literally minutes of us crossing the threshold to the farm.
Well, now you had lived elsewhere in Rhode Island before moving into this farmhouse in Harrisville, right?
Yes, we did. Contrary to what it says in the film, we did not ever live in New Jersey. Another thing that I would like to clarify immediately is that my character in the film is a little snippy at the beginning about having been dragged to this place, and nothing could have been further than the truth. I would have swallowed my own tongue before I was ever disrespectful to either of my parents. And I was thrilled and delighted to move to the farm, but wait to move to the farm from the moment I saw it. And I was not a flirty girl either. I was a bookworm. Things just seemed to make me happy. So I just wanted to clarify those viewpoints referring to the portrayal of my character in the film. Other than that, I think they got it pretty much right. I was very protective towards my younger sisters, and I was never really afraid in the house. Except tonight, I'm just saying, which is portrayed in the film at the beginning of an exorcism, which did not occur. First of all, Ed Warren was perfectly capable of conducting what he saw in the film, but he never had the chance to remotely go there because my father punched me and took me to the floor, and whatever came into my mother that night had a picture of the chair she was sitting in, and each for 20 people. It was from the dining room. That was the only time it was that I was there, but I was truly terrified out of my mind, and I can revisit it with at will. Not that it's something that I like to revisit, but I find that telling the true story, I must revisit it frequently. It's what is the most compelling incident occurred at the farm there that involved other mortals. I truly believe that whatever entered my mother that night was not of this world. It was from the language through her. It doesn't come from it. It is not Latin. I was Latin. And it was not good for me. It was horrible. And it couldn't go for it didn't want to do. I believe what it wanted to do to everyone in that house most positive thoughts in the light, because this is a scary time, and they have really been through it this last month. It has been the big black cloud over what has otherwise been a bright light in the firmament. You know, the books were out for 2 years, and I think they had 3 visitors. And they were high school friends of mine that said, I remember coming to a party here in 1976, you know, hi, how are you? Not trying to be intrusive at all, just stopping by to say hello. And that happened over the first 2 years that the books were out worldwide. And now all hell has broken loose up there. And I know that it has been mitigated somewhat in the last week or so, but still, you know, the folks that own that farm deserve a good night's sleep. And who would want that kind of scrutiny and that kind of disruption showered upon them? Can you imagine trying to sleep in your own home at night and wondering who's crawling around outside?
Right.
Peeking in your windows.
And not knowing...
Yeah.
Not knowing that you're safe in your own home, that if you go out to, you know, take the garbage out, that you might be, you know, infiltrated by teenagers out there just looking, and all of a sudden they'll start snapping your picture. Look, there's the woman that lives in the Conjuring house.
Yeah,
now,
no, it's terrible. But I've said my piece about that. But getting back to your initial question.
Well, I do just want to ask you a quick question about that, because you did put out a video, and there's some discussion going on in the chat room about that video, and about whether or not, you know, you were fostering people going there by putting out these books. In the books, do you give the location of the farmhouse?
No.
I was going to say, I could imagine that you kept, knowing that you know the Sutcliffes and that you have interviewed Norma, and there's video of you online interviewing her, and knowing how much of a help she was to you in the years since, that I couldn't imagine that you'd want to invade their privacy by publishing that information. So they weren't getting this from you.
In fact, if I might interrupt you just briefly, not only did every description of the farm and its rough location go into the books with her permission. It was not even, I mean, so many people already knew about this place, knew for decades about this place, that were locals, you know, so it wasn't really that. I never, ever, anywhere published the address. You know, the only way to be honest about it, since so many people knew about it, was to name the road, but the road is 7 miles long before it even goes up into Massachusetts. And on top of that, the house is very secluded. And on top of that, there was no way to tell this story without, you know, telling the truth that this occurred in Harrisville, Rhode Island. I would have had to literally fictionalize the entire thing in order to protect that location.
And fictionalizing one aspect would call into question
the other aspect of it. Yes, absolutely. Every photograph that I've ever taken of the farm, including the ones that I've published online, of the vintage photographs of our home, well, those were ours, and the house looked very different at that time. But the photographs that we've put out in the last couple of years are almost all of them from quite a distance, indistinguishable in terms of we choose very carefully what images we use. And on top of that, I never, ever, ever published the street address. And my SEO administrator, Ms. Margie Mursky from Minneapolis, scours the internet and removes everything that she can from every place that she can, from the idiots who have been in public records, been able to find the address and then put it out there at will. They're the ones that I have an objection about.
What was the publishing date of the first volume of the book?
It was March 11th. It was the day the tsunami hit Japan, March 11th, 2011.
So, having already been featured on Ghost Hunters in Season 2, which came out in 2005, was probably filmed in 2004, so Norma Sutcliffe had already contacted Taps and had them come, and by the time you published the first volume of the book, it had already been featured on Ghost Hunters and seen worldwide, and so anybody that did figure out what street it was on would have been able to just drive down the road and find it.
Right. And it was so well known, anybody could just drive into Harrisville and ask.
Sure. I mean, I can't imagine there's too many 1700s farmhouses left around, and that look as distinctive as that. Well, but I was gonna say, but does look as distinctive as that property does too.
Right. Right.
So I just wanted to get that out there and just kind of clear the air a little bit about that, because there's been a lot of question of how people are finding this house, and I know that there's been a few morons that have posted videos online with Google Maps directions of how to get there and showing it on Google Earth and everything. So
right.
I just wanted to
have nothing to do with any of that. Those are, the fanatic fringe out there that just wants to draw more and more people to the same place that they're intruding upon. I mean, they just completely ignore the posted no trespassing signs. Completely ignore them. Walk past them like they don't even exist. I'd say they were raised by wolves, but that would be a terrible insult to wolves. No.
Well, we can just move on from them, and let's not give them any more credence, except to say that our friends out in the paranormal have been donating their time down there, keeping a tight perimeter around there. So watch out, because the only thing worse than running afoul of the police department there is running afoul of Andrew Lake and Ken DaCosta.
Yes, thank you. I was going to mention those two fine gentlemen. And Marlena, Gabrielle, and also Julie DeMay has been wonderful in terms of their protective influence around two people who I adore, truly, and have done nothing but help me from the inception of this project.
So now, getting back into the actual occurrences that happened in that house, now you never had any of these type experiences before moving to Harrisville? No spirit activity, no paranormal activity of any kind?
No, I would say that the only thing that was odd about me, personally, was my innate ability to communicate with animals, which showed itself very, very early in my life, by 2 to 4 years, between 2 and 4 years old. My parents saw clearly that I was an unusual child in that respect. But other than that, we were a perfectly normal family that moved into the farmhouse and left 10 years later as a paranormal family.
And when you moved into the house, I mean, what was family life like for you guys? Was everything hunky-dory? Were there some problems? Was there any kind of strife going on, any kind of dysfunction going on in the family?
No, other than just the stresses involved with moving. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, is even though it wasn't that huge a move from Cumberland to Harrisville, really only like a 30-minute drive, it was a big move, moving into such a massive colonial farmhouse, and our things seemed so sparse once we got there. We'd come from a 7-room Cape Cod and went into this 12-room and 3 pantries and a woodshed and a summer kitchen, and and then there's the barn, and it was huge. It seemed vacuumous to us, and it just sucked up our furniture. And so it wasn't long before Mom started hitting local antique shops and whatever she could find at yard sales. And I mean, we really were Salvation Army family at the very beginning, because it was whatever we could get that was affordable to fill this incredible house. It was just massive. But of course, within the first day, we had all of our bedrooms chosen and our beds set up, and I had my own room directly above the parlor, and I was the only one with a double bed, and thank God I had one, because my sisters, within, the first night, Cindy came and crawled into bed with me the first night and said, I hear voices. And I asked, invited her in to sleep with me, and I asked her what she was talking about, and I was sleepy, but I remember, and she said, because it was shocking what she said to me, she said, there's a lot of voices in my room, they're all talking at once, they're all around my bed, they won't let me sleep, it's like they're trying to keep me awake, and they keep saying the same thing over and over again. And I asked her what it was, and she said, there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall.
Wow. That's to have something come through like that too. I mean, normally you can kind of, if it's something simple like Get Out or things like that, you can kind of chalk it up to just being almost a figment of imagination, or just nerves and being in a new house or anything like that. But to have something come through that is both so direct and so obscure, you must have just been petrified when you heard that.
Strangely enough, I wasn't. I was more fascinated because it was such a direct message, and also because I was hearing a horn. I could hear what sounded like a bugle at a distance. At first, I thought it was the wind coming through the eaves because it was the middle of winter. It was the second week of January when we moved in. And the wind was howling, and the house was new. And, I'll tell you, not only did every single one of us at some point wonder if it was our imagination, at some point, every single one of us questioned our own sanity.
So, and it seemed like things were starting to ramp up pretty quickly. Normally with a lot of these stories, a lot of these cases, we hear about how it takes a kind of a long time for the activity to ramp up. But it seems like things picked up pretty much right away from the minute they moved in.
They did. And the thing that's most interesting about that is that we visited the farm a number of times between when my mother found it in June of 1970 and when we actually moved in. They closed on the property in December of 1970, but of course it fell so close to the holidays that my mother insisted that we spend Christmas in Cumberland and move into the house in January, and that gave Mr. Kenyon some extra time too, because he'd lived there for I don't know how many decades, and it was just loaded to the gunnels with stuff, and the barn too, and he needed some extra time. Plus there was some problem with the survey. It wasn't coming in exactly as it should, and so it was so impossible. There was snow on the ground. They couldn't get it exactly right. There were a few issues with that. So it ended up that we stayed in the house in Cumberland about 3 weeks longer than we had intended to. But in all the times that we went to visit Mr. Kenyon, that entire summer, fall, and into the beginning of winter, nothing happened. Nothing happened to any of us until the day we moved into the house, until we occupied it.
You must have known something was up when Mr. Kenyon gave your father an ominous warning, and weren't the fireplaces sealed up?
Yes, the fireplaces were all sealed in the house, completely sealed over. The mantel boards were all exposed, but the innards were completely sealed up. And the day that we moved in, and my father didn't know that 3 of us had seen the man in the dining room. He didn't know anything about that. But just as Mr. Kenyon had finished taking his last belongings out of the china cabinet in the dining room, and we helped move his stuff out, he used our truck to move the last of his stuff, and Dad and I went to the storage unit that he had, that his son had gotten for him, and offloaded the last of his belongings for him. But prior to that happening, he asked my father to go for a walk with him outside, and took him out into the side yard in the middle of a snowstorm. And he just put his hand on my father's arm and said, "Roger, for the sake of your family, leave the lights on at night." And that was literally the only thing that he said to my father. And of course, you move into a huge house like this, my father immediately thought, so the girls don't fall downstairs they're not familiar with, so that they can find their way to the one bathroom that's on the first floor. It didn't occur to him that meant anything else until months later. But my mother did ask him. He came for coffee and cake one afternoon while we were out sledding, and my mother said to him, "Earl, where I hear very strange sounds in the parlor," and he just kind of winked at her and he had a quirky grin, and he said, "Swallows in the chimney, my dear, swallows in the chimney." Mm-hmm. And it was, the way he said it was like, that's what he'd been telling himself for decades.
Right.
But he always kept all the lights on in the house. he and his wife, for all the years they lived there, and we didn't find out until we started to get to know other people in the community, but there was never a time anybody drove past that house in the middle of the night that it didn't glow, because every single light in that house was left on all night long.
Well, we are talking with Andrea Perron. She's the author of House of Darkness, House of Light, the inside story of what happened in the Conjuring house in Harrisville, Rhode Island. We're going to take a break, real quick break. When we come back on the other side, we will talk more with Andrea. We'll also take your calls at 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. Back in just a minute here on Spooky Southcoast on WBSM.
These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. So you take protein to build muscle. On average, only 10% is digested for muscle, and the other 90% is converted to fat. No wonder you're frustrated. You're not building muscle because your protein is literally making you fat. But with Amino Prime, virtually 100% of your protein can be converted into muscle. That's right, 100% into muscle. Amino Prime is the most advanced muscle-building, fat-shredding enzyme in the world. And right now, the first 100 callers get a free trial.
With Amino Prime, I can feel it working within minutes. My workouts are intense, my energy has improved, my abs are getting more ripped, and I'm getting ridiculously stronger. Plus, I've already dropped 2 pant sizes.
Amino Prime is all natural and not a stimulant. Want to try it for free? Just be one of the first 100 people to visit timeformuscle.com or call 800-267-0102. That's 800-267-0102. Or go to timeformuscle.com. Trials are extremely limited. That's timeformuscle.com. Some exclusions may apply. If you're an athlete of any kind, then you know about joint pain, muscle pain, and even arthritis. Nearly half of all Americans suffer from some kind of pain due to chronic inflammation. Here's legendary golfer and a NanoBlock ambassador, Fred Couples.
This is Fred Couples for NanoBlock. It's been great for me and could be for you too. A NanoBlock is a breakthrough supplement scientifically proven to quickly and effectively reduce inflammation and get rid of your pain fast. For me, a NanoBlock has been phenomenal. I started taking a NanoBlock, and within a few days, I simply started feeling better. A NanoBlock was an amazing find for me, and I continue to feel better.
Pick up your supply of a NanoBlock today by visiting your local GNC store or going to GNC.com. A NanoBlock is a GNC top-selling product and 5-star rated. Even better, become a Gold Card member and get an instant 20% off. That's right, 20% off for becoming a Gold Card member. But hurry, this offer expires soon. So get a NanoBlock today at a GNC store near you or GNC.com. Your station for the South Coast, AM 1420 WBSM.
Hello.
Hey, man, you up?
Wake up, man.
I think your house is haunted. Hey, come on, it's 2:30 in the morning.
I can't sleep in here, man. I'm scared.
Welcome back into Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz. You can watch the show at SpookySouthcoast.com/spooky-TV or /SpookyTV. That works too. And you can see what's going on in the studio. I guess the audio is a little better now, Matt. We've been able to improve it a bit. Yep. So far, so good. So if you want to listen to it there while we are broadcasting via video, and if not, if you have some issues with the audio, you can always get the online streaming audio from WBSM.com as well. We also want to remind everybody that we are on Twitter at SpookySC. We're on Facebook, and now Matt Costa and myself are on Vine too. So you can watch me. We send out some Vines before the show, and Matt sends out some during the program. Yep. So you can follow me at Tim Weisberg, and you're at Matt Costa.
Yeah, it's still terribly interesting, but
no, well, you have a very limited amount of time to be interested. It's not enough time. Yeah, what's it, 10 seconds? That's enough time for me to say, anyway, my time is up. But we are talking with Andrea Perron. She's the author of House of Darkness, House of Light. It's a 3-part series of books dealing with what really went on with the Perron family living in the house that was featured in the film The Conjuring. Not the actual house, because that was, for Hollywood, but in the house in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where all of this took place. And Andrea, I know that you've been very, you've been making the rounds, and you've been talking a lot about what goes on. I think that a lot of people kind of understand that there's going to be some Hollywood dramatization of your family and of the story. And they have to take some dramatic license for the sake of the story. But one thing that you pointed out to me right away, and I found to be very interesting, is that even though in the film your family is portrayed as not being religious and not being Christians, you actually were, and you were church-going as well.
Yes, actually we were. I understand why they felt the need to draw a line of demarcation between the Warrens being devout Catholics, and I think they did it for juxtaposition. But the fact of the matter is that my mother was raised in the Southern Christian tradition. My father was a Roman Catholic altar boy and followed the religion, and my mother converted to Catholicism to marry my father, and then all five of us were baptized into the church. We never left the church. The church turned its back on us. The parish in Harrisville had a priest at the time who was, I believe, was truly afraid of what he was hearing about what was happening at the farm, because we talked about it. The five kids, until we were told to shut our mouths, we were sharing what was happening in the house, and it got around town very quickly. There were less than 10,000 people in that town when we moved there in 1971, and it didn't take long for the word to spread. And at one point, the priest suggested to my father that we seek another parish in which to worship, and my mother was offended. My father just kind of threw his hands up in the air because he really didn't have a clue at that point what we'd been saying. We didn't discuss it with Dad because he was clearly highly skeptical and always came up with a pragmatic explanation for whatever was happening in the house, even if that was the unreasonable, irrational explanation. The most rational explanation was that we lived in a haunted house.
But he was still in that denial phase?
Oh, yeah. He was king of denial.
And when you're going up against that, I mean, your father, and I'm just assuming that you're just like any other typical family in the 1970s, your father is the rock of the family, and your father is the one who, especially being all girls, you're looking for him for protection, and you're looking for him to be the guardian of the family, and for him to dismiss it out of hand like that, it must have been very, very traumatic for you in that regard, that here's the person who's supposed to be the last line of defense between anything evil and yourselves, and it's hard to get them to buy into what's happening.
Well, I find that to be a very insightful and a very accurate statement.
So how
that his fear and his inability to control the environment in which he had deliberately placed his family were the deciding factors in terms of his behavior in the first within the first year or so. And still, I mean, for several years, he just denied or came up with another explanation. It wasn't until he was approached. It wasn't until, I mean, things happened to him, and he still denied it. I mean, he was in bed with my mother the night that the apparition first showed herself, and his back was serrated. I mean, it was bloodied that night. He was in like a coma. My mother thought he was dead. She grabbed his full head of hair and shook his head and pulled his hair so hard that if he had been of this world, he would have awakened. Mm-hmm. And when the cover fell off his back as she was trying to wake him, and she saw what had happened to his back, which she did not do, she knew that this was a very serious problem, because there, right beside her, lay her husband, and he couldn't do anything to help her.
And that means that if you look at it with that happening, that means that you are helpless against it. Right. If they can have that kind of control over somebody, then nobody is safe.
Right, which is what makes me, I don't think that scratches that appeared twice on my father's back, twice that happened to him, both times that the major manifestations happened in their bedroom. He was home both times, and was unable to intervene on my mother's behalf in any way.
So now you're starting to piece together the kind of the story of what's going on, that there are multiple spirits in the house that are appearing before you and everything. I know that this is at a time when people don't talk about these things, and there's not a lot of media out there about these, but did the word haunted at what point did the word haunted start to come up within your family?
The word was first used by Sam Olafson, our attorney and our family friend, after the first major episode in my mother's room, in my parents' room. The next morning, she called Sam at his home in Providence, on the east side of Providence, and she said, "I think I've made a terrible error in judgment. Find a way for us to get out of this house." Mm-hmm. But there were no laws, disclosure laws on the books in Rhode Island, and he did dig up what cases had existed. There were 2 claims from new owners of homes, and both of them were dismissed out of hand by the court. They never even got a hearing.
And so you're going up against really having no legal recourse, having no spiritual recourse with the church. Sure. Basically, you're trapped.
Yes, and that's the number one question that I get. I mean, I hear it so frequently that I'm adding it to an FAQ page on my website, because my favorite rendition of it is, "What the hell was wrong with you people that you stayed there for 10 years?" And there are many answers to that, and I detail them in the books. A crashing economy, gas lines, the oil embargo, the formation of the oil cartel in the Middle East at that time, the upheaval of the end of the Nixon administration. Our economy was plummeting. We had out of control inflation. The value of the home was falling monthly. There was no way for my parents to financially survive walking away from that home. There was no place to put their 5 daughters. Meanwhile, the 5 of us, who did not know the severity of what was happening with my mother, obviously she did not disclose that to us. Every time there was even any mention of, "We need to sell this place," we literally cry. Please don't. We love it here. There's stuff happening, but we'll be okay, and it'll stop. And don't worry, it's all right. We'll get used to it. We'd say anything. The 5 of us would say anything, because none of us wanted to leave it. It was just a paradise. It was a child's greatest dream of a place in which to live, even though it was cold and it was uncomfortable, and there were a lot of things about the house that were not that pleasant. It was a place where all of us felt that we belonged, truly belonged. And myself particularly, it's the only place I've ever lived in my life that truly felt like home to me. And given the opportunity, I'll buy it back in a heartbeat. When the time comes that they no longer want to be there, or that they just really need to downsize, or for whatever reason, I've already put that out there, because I want to buy the farm back, not because I want to live there, but because I think that it needs to be open to people who are truly serious about studying supernatural activity. And I want it to be open to scientists and investigators that have a long history of doing what they do best. Ken, for instance, is I would want him there in a heartbeat. I would want Keith Johnson to have access to it whenever. I would want it to be a spiritual center and a center for scientific study, because I truly believe that it's a portal disguised as a farmhouse. And it's not just a portal to the past, it's a portal to the future. And I have evidence to support that claim.
Well, my co-host here, Matt Moniz, is a scientist, so he definitely was somebody we want on the team.
And I've been studying this stuff close to 30 years. I'd love to get a chance to check the place out.
It just needs to be wired for sound. It needs to have cameras in every corner of it.
I can make that happen.
So that it can be examined literally, on an hour-by-hour basis, because what would be picked up there is just amazing. And, for those times that if any one of us goes back into that house, something happens immediately. Just like when Nancy was dating Eddie Richardson back in the late 70s, his family, his ancestors built that house. Before it was the Arnold estate, it was the Dexter Richardson homestead. The land was deeded, thousands of acres of land, deeded in 1680, surveyed by the original John Smith. Anybody who knows their history knows that name. Mm-hmm. And the house as it stands now was completed in 1736, and it had been added on over the decades. So we don't even know when they started building that house, but there is an outside window between what was my bedroom and the middle bedroom of the house that they left as they added on. So, it's just an absolutely fascinating and extraordinary structure. There are so few places on Earth, certainly in this country, that have that kind of history and that mystique, and it's just so beautiful that you can feel the energy. And I'm telling you, Tim, I swear to God, I know two people who have been to that house, both with physical infirmities, one extremely hard of hearing and one with very poor eyesight. And when they go into that house, their senses are fully restored, wow. And when they leave, their senses are once again impaired. So what does that tell you scientifically? There is something going on there where time and space, as we know it, is suspended.
Have you repeated this a number of times?
I have. I've told a number of people about this.
Have you recorded it?
No. No, I haven't, because I was not there either time, but both of these individuals are people that I know and who had witnesses to these events.
And those people who had those had those problems alleviated, if they go back, does it happen each time they go back?
Yes.
Fascinating. That really is fascinating. We only have about 5 minutes here before we have to take a break for the network news. But in that time, you did make a very interesting point. And of course, we're talking about the 1970s when we had all that economic turmoil that was going on that did make it hard for your family to leave. But so often we hear in the paranormal that when people are having these profound experiences and they're afraid to be in their own home, the common response is, well, why don't you just move? Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you get out of there? And you pointed out beautifully just how hard it is to do that.
Well, and not only that, though, I have to tell you, Tim, upon reflection and in retrospect, with 30-plus years to look back upon, I realize now, and have for several years, as this is all gelled in my brain, and I've written this story down in its entirety, I realized that the same elements that conspired to bring us to the farm likewise conspired to keep us on that farm for a decade, until we learned our lessons well. I knew from the age of 12 that someday I would be the one to tell this story. And that's why, for my birthday, the first year that I was there, I let my mother know that I had filled my journal and I would need a new one. And I journaled every major incident and a lot of the minor ones that occurred in that house. And over all the years that I lived there, and even when I went off to college, I have dozens of letters from my sisters. We affectionately called it the ghost post. So that when anything happened in the house, they would either call me in Pittsburgh and tell me what happened, or they would write it down and send it to me, because they knew I was the one that was chronicling everything. And just really for my own purposes at the time, but I knew someday I would tell this story, because I knew even as a child how significant it was. And I don't think it was so important that it was us per se. I think that it happened at all is miraculous, and that we were the ones privileged to experience it. But there are members of my family that consider that decade a curse, and then I'm the one who I would say really considers it essentially a blessing.
Well, we are just about up against the news here. We do have a caller on the line, but I will ask that caller if they wouldn't mind hanging on through the news or perhaps calling back after the news. And if anybody else would like to call in, coming up in hour number 2, the numbers are 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. You can also reach us via the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. That's another great way to share your questions and thoughts. You can also tweet us at SpookySC or email us SpookyCrew@SpookySouthcoast.com. During the break, go to the website, read our article post on Andrea and about her books, House of Darkness, House of Light. There's also a link there. If you want to pick those up, you can get them in both hard copy form and as an ebook. I highly recommend picking up the hard copy form, the hard copy version, because these are going to become collector's items because they're just flying off the virtual shelves. I know a couple of times I thought I saw that Amazon had sold out posted there, only to get some more in there. So these books are flying off the shelves. So go to houseofdarknesshouseoflight.com if you want to get them. Also during the break, if you want to go to legendtrips.com, we have the tickets up for sale for our USS Salem event. There's not that many left. So if you want to go to the USS Salem with us on August 31st, you better get those tickets now. And once you do, you can also book your bunk on the ship for just $30 more if you want to spend the night there. We also have announced Legend Trips events September 28th at Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and October 12th at the Fearing Tavern in Wareham, Mass. And coming up November 9th at the Haunted Victorian Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts. Those tickets will go on sale very, very soon, and they'll be limited to 30 people. So if you want to go on that investigation with us, you need to join the mailing list at legendtrips.com. Back in just a bit here on Spooky Southcoast.
The station the South Coast turns to for local news, talk, weather, and sports. WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420, WBSM.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson. Nearly 40 wildfires are burning from Alaska to Arizona. 10 homes have burned in Willow Springs, Utah. A 50-square-mile fire. Evacuee Jane C. is worried about the home she's left behind.
When you get a chance to sit back and think about it, you remember all the things you didn't get out that you should have gotten out. And it's too late.
Biggest brush fire in just the past few hours forced hundreds more evacuations in the central Idaho ski resort Spring Valley and Ketchum, where high winds are driving flames toward them.
A windswept blaze forcing so many to flee, roads out are packed. I'll probably just take some few antiques I have that are precious, some memories of my parents. In this affluent ski resort area, where celebrities like Tom Hanks and Arnold Schwarzenegger own property, insurance companies are sending their own private fire trucks to help protect many million-dollar houses. The smoke is so thick, even crews at a nearby air quality station had to get out. Bazi Kanani, ABC News, Denver.
All the cockpit controls were working on the UPS cargo plane that crashed in Alabama, say federal safety investigators. Both pilots aboard died. NTSB's Robert Sumwalt was asked if recent crashes show a pattern.
This is the third landing accident in about a 5 or 6 week period of time. And I'll tell you that we are here to investigate the facts and circumstances and conditions surrounding this accident. And once we understand that, then we'll look to see if there are wider systemic issues that need to be addressed.
A man who claimed he was sexually abused by former Penn State assistant football coach Jerry Sandusky has become the first to settle a civil claim against the university. The man's attorney says not only is victim number 5, he gets several $1 million. A day after arrests of protesters, the Egyptian government's imposed a nighttime curfew, but already thousands are defying it. You're listening to ABC News.
How do you celebrate your anniversary? We celebrate ours with a love for color. Ask Sherwin-Williams and save 35% on paints and stains August 16th through the 19th. You can also win prizes and an in-home color consultation from HGTV's David Brumstead when you vote for your favorite color online. Visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams paint store and save 35% today. Find your nearest store at sherwinwilliams.com/sale. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details. For a fast, accurate temperature reading, nothing beats the Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer. Here's what a real Exergen customer had to say.
This works great. My doctor's office uses the same brand and recommended this one to me. I love that I can check my baby's temperature when sleeping because he stays asleep.
The Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer is backed by over 50 published medical studies, more than any other thermometer, and is used and recommended by more medical professionals everywhere, giving you the peace of mind that you're getting the best. The Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer.
The latest Major League Baseball player to be suspended is a three-peater.
Miguel Tejada was once the American League's most valuable player. That was in 2002 when he played for the A's. He now plays for the Royals, but not for the rest of this season, he won't. Major League Baseball slapped the 39-year-old infielder with a 105-game suspension for testing positive for amphetamines. This is his third positive test, hence the length of the suspension. It doesn't end with the season either. The ban carries over into next season as well. For a 39-year-old player, his career could be finished. John Closey, ABC News.
On the rise in Texas, measles.
This year, the state logged 14 cases of measles so far, all but one of them in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Last year, Texas had 0 cases, and it's that disparity that has health officials concerned. The source of the outbreak may never be known, but Dallas County epidemiologist Wendy Chung says international travelers can bring the sickness into an area.
Certainly, there's a lot of hotspots of measles activity abroad.
Chung urges residents to get immunized if they aren't already. Paul Chambers, ABC News, Dallas.
British police say they are examining newly received information, no word exactly what, relating to the deaths of Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed, assessing its relevance and credibility. Scotland Yard stresses it's not reopening the case. Diana and Fayed were killed in a Paris car crash in 1997. This is ABC News.
Hi, I'm Joan London, and if you're worried about your parent or a loved one living alone like I was, and you want reliable senior care information, then call A Place for Mom, the nation's largest senior living referral service. With one phone call, you'll get free information on assisted living, Alzheimer's care, nursing homes, even important financial information. It's a free service, so call now.
Call now, 800-460-3580. 800-460-3580.
Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. So here's a 26-second message of encouragement.
Hi, I'm Stacy. Look, I've been there. It's tough. And I just want to say, if you find yourself feeling negative, use it as motivation. Let it be like the fuel in the fire to keep you going. Because the best is yet to come. Seriously, you're capable of great things. Things you probably haven't even dreamed of yet. So don't quit now. See you at graduation.
Do you have 26 seconds to convince a student to stay at their desk? Now you can share your message of support at boostup.org. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
Your station for the Southcoast, AM 1420 WBSM. Your station for the Southcoast, AM 1420 WBSM. Welcome to Health Talk, a program on health.
Everything's just going crazy all of a sudden. We're just going to ditch right out of that. All of a sudden, everything started going crazy. The broadcast that I had muted suddenly went loud on the computer, and then the computer's firing off. Oh, man, that's the kind of night that it is. And welcome back in the Spooky South Coast. We are joined tonight by our guest, Andrea Perron, talking about House of Darkness, House of Light, her series of books that tells the inside story about what happened in the house featured in The Conjuring. That's right, the Andrea Perron, who a lot of people are probably just thinking of as a character in a movie. No, real person, real family, real haunting. We are getting the inside story. And it's kind of funny that the computer just kind of was causing us some problems, because earlier this evening, one of our show's number one listeners, Chris, was listening, was reading your books, and she actually had prepared some information to share with me in advance of our interview tonight. And she was talking to me, I was talking to her over Skype, and all of a sudden, right when we got to the part where we were talking about Bathsheba, my computer started acting funny, and all of a sudden the sound on the Skype call began digitizing and kind of doubling up and doing all these weird processing sounding effects that it never does. And I'm a sports writer by trade, Andrea, so I use Skype every day, multiple times a day, to make phone calls. And I've never heard this happen. I know that it can happen if the internet slows down or whatever, but I've never had this issue before. And I immediately turned on a recording program that I use to record calls. And the minute that I turned the recorder on, this problem stopped. Well, probably about a minute and a half into it, but once I had the recorder running, it stopped. So I'm going to go back and listen to that later on and see if maybe something wasn't trying to come through during that. But between that and now the computer issues here, I don't know. I think someone's trying to keep us from talking about this subject.
Actually, I think probably when you review what you had recorded, you might be surprised by what you hear. I normally, when I begin any kind of a interview process, especially if it's over Skype, I apologize in advance for anything that might happen, because it's not unusual. In fact, it is the norm for there to be some kind of electronic issue, problem, disturbance, interference as soon as her name comes up. I was doing a show a few months ago from Germany with Matthew Brandau, who's from New Hampshire originally, and we had to cancel the show. There was so much interference. We only got about 25 minutes into a 2-hour show, and we had to cancel it. And I normally do apologize in advance. I didn't get to that tonight, but this is very difficult. He has a way. The frequency, especially on Skype, the frequencies, the satellites, I don't understand. Perhaps Matt, as a scientist, can explain it with some more clarity. But she'll hang up the phone on me, so if we get disconnected, just call me like that.
Sure.
Don't be surprised of anything that happens, because it happens with such regularity now that it has literally become the norm when I am discussing her.
Well, and I do want to discuss her. I'm sure we're tempting fate here a bit. But when all these things are going on, and eventually you make the connection to Bathsheba Sherman, how did that come about in terms of your own research of finding out about Bathsheba?
Well, I found out about Bathsheba as I was still very much the youngster. Mr. McEachern, as he's known in the book, was an abutting landowner and neighbor of ours. And he was in his maybe mid to late 80s when my mother befriended him, or he befriended my mother, and he came to our house once or twice. But she would go over to his homestead off of Sherman Farm Road and talk with him as well. And he's the one that initially told her about Bathsheba, and that's what triggered her desire to do more research. He said that she was originally Fair, and if you come from Rhode Island, you know the name Fair is integral to the state, one of the original families. She was somehow either married or involved with the Arnold clan through marriage, Fairs and Arnold, but she had a child in her care when she was probably in her late teens, and the baby died. When the body was examined, a needle was found impaled at the base of the skull. The doctor said that the child had died from convulsion. It was an inquest. It wasn't. It never made it to trial. There was no trial. There was an inquest to try to determine what had happened while it was in her care. And we don't even know if it was her own child or if it was someone else's, because the information is incomplete. But according to Mr. she was brought up on some kind of inquest charge in the village of Hatchet, because it was before the time that Borovo was even incorporated in the town. And he told my mother that for all intents and purposes, she was let off the hook by the time they were indentured servants, and so they were at her mercy. There was much talk about her having been a practicing witch, and that she had sacrificed to the devil for eternal youth and beauty. This, I presume, based on the fact that she was, by all accounts, a ravishingly beautiful woman, and that after the baby died, she aged rapidly, which I found very interesting because, of course, my mother endured the same thing. My mother aged rapidly. So that was, well, I'll get back to that. But anyway, Bathsheba Sherman was never actually convicted of anything. There were also rumors that she was not actually buried at the Riverside Cemetery, that the family claimed her body. This is all hearsay. This is what Mr. McCutcheon told my mother years and years ago, and then my mother did some follow-up research through the history of Burrillville. She went as far as Worcester, Massachusetts, to find historical records and try to piece together the history of the house, and specifically what she could learn about Bathsheba Sherman. She died in May of 1885, and when her body was examined, I saw the death record with my own eyes, and in the margin, even though her death was written in as having passed away from paralysis, in the margin was the physician's note in quotations, "It is as if her body had turned stone."
And to hear some of these, as you said, a lot of it's hearsay, and you really don't know, but legends are usually based in some kind of truth.
Yes.
And it could be any number of reasons why she was ostracized, in addition to what happened with the child. But also, being a woman of such beauty, there was probably quite a few other women that were jealous of her. And I know that there's been some accusations that she may have been involved with some of these men. And there's even speculation that she might have had a thing for your father, Roger.
Yes. Actually, whoever it was in the house that was approaching my father made her intentions very clear, and she really loathed my mother, and made overt advances towards my father by stroking his neck, touching his back and his shoulders, and letting what that he described as ice cold fingertips drop down his spine towards his body.
To me, I mean, I understand that your family feels as though they were dealing with a number of different spirits, and you had different manifestations of such. But to me, that sounds clearly like a traditional succubus. And it just makes me think, and I've been kind of holding this in a bit as you share these thoughts, but I did talk about it with Keith Johnson, and everything that's happened on that property, the suicides, the men who froze to death, everything that happened with Bathsheba, it all seems to be coming down to there's, in my uneducated opinion, because I haven't been there, I haven't investigated, and I haven't lived through it like you have, it just seems like there's some demonic entity there that is reaching its tendrils into your family in different ways.
I didn't believe in demons until the night of the seance, and then I saw something happen to my mother. It was utterly, entirely inexplicable. I saw her body come into existence before this mass in such a way that you would think that every bone in her body would have had to break. To hear that voice come out of her, to hear it boom through the house the way it did, to hear her scream and shriek in pain. It was the most horrific thing I've ever experienced in my life. I pray to God and never ever see anything or hear anything like that a few people, not everybody, knows about yet. I haven't talked about it much, but last March, so March of 2012, I was invited and then suggested that my family come to New Line Cinema House. That they were thrilled, and all 7 of us were going to go. At the last minute, my mother backed out on the trip, and interestingly, Lily Taylor, who plays my mother, likewise backed out from going to the set that day, even though she was supposed to be there. So she remember that didn't come out from Wilmington with a remote location. And we were all very reticent, and we were all very disappointed because you know how many times in your life you get a chance to do something like this. And we wanted Mom to come with us, not only so that she could have the experience, but that we could keep an eye on her. You know, she's aged and she's frail and had health issues, and nobody wanted to leave her home alone. She insisted she would be absolutely fine. We went out to the set. Everything was going swimmingly well. We got to meet everyone. They were as starstruck as we were. It was mutual starstruckness. And we had great conversation, shared a lot. They stopped filming 3 times so that the screenwriters could say script change because we were telling them things. And it was literally having an impact on what they were filming on that particular day. And so everything was going well. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, after we had a scrumptious lunch, we were asked to do a group interview. They set it up within a matter of a few minutes. We all signed the waivers, sat down or took our standing locations in a group. They set the cameras, the booms, the screens, everything was set. We were 45 minutes or so into this interview when a rogue wind, supernatural wind, cut that whole set right in half. Everything went flying. Cameras, phones, screens, people. I mean, it was a 70 or 80 mile an hour wind. I immediately knew what it was. We were talking about Bathsheba. I looked around the 5-acre plus set, and there was no wind anyplace else in these streets. Nothing was moving except us. And I leaned forward. I was standing in the back row, and my sister Christine was at the other end. And I leaned forward, and I said, Bathsheba's first. And she nodded knowingly. 2 hours later, we got the first text. Of course, we had our cell phones off. There was no way to reach us if we were in such a remote location. They weren't really working well anyway. But 2 hours later, we got a text from my niece. Grandma fell at the house. She broke her hip. She's in the hospital. I'm with her. Well, they called the van. We left that almost immediately, as fast as they could get that van. In the meantime, when we got closer into Wilmington, North Carolina, and the signals were better, there was a flurry of activity. She was in such bad shape that the doctor didn't know if she would survive the anesthesia. They decided to postpone the surgery and drug her up so that she wouldn't be in such agony. And they performed the surgery the next afternoon. They told us not to drive all night, come in the following day. When we arrived at the hospital at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock that afternoon, all 5 of her children walked into her room at the same time. She had just come out of recovery. Her doctor, her nurse, and 3 of my nieces were in that room, and all 5 of us walked in, and my mother, from a completely sedated state, sat bolt upright in bed and looked me dead in the eye and said, Bathsheba does not want to be exposed. I have not sensed that presence in more than 30 years. And then she laid back down and didn't wake up again until the following day. There's no recollection of that.
How is she doing now?
After about 3 months of like constant care and rehabilitation and a serious bout with pneumonia, it took about 6 months to know that she was going to survive this ordeal. 2012 was the worst year of my life and the best year of my life. I saw so many wonderful things happen around this story, and I came very close to losing my mother. And I'll tell you what, when my mother ratted out Bathsheba, that entity and I went
Well, on that note, if anybody has any calls for our guest, Andrea Perron, you can give us a call, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. We have a couple of calls here lined up, so let's go right to the phones. Good evening. You're on Spooky Southcoast with Andrea Perron. How are you?
Oh, doing pretty good.
Do you have a question for Andrea?
Yeah, what's been one of the most interesting things about this whole experience?
The most interesting thing that happened to me in the house was when I
or just in general, like what's been one of the most interesting things about the whole experience, the whole, everything.
Everything?
Just everything. What's been one of the most interesting things?
Well, that covers a lot of decades and a lot of ground.
Okay,
are you speaking about the process of having her story turned into a film, or about what she experienced back in the 70s in this farmhouse?
I guess, whichever one's easier to answer, it's all good.
Okay. I'll let you take that.
The interesting thing to me, and I can answer this, the answer came to me immediately when you put it that way. The most interesting thing to me is that about 4 years ago, I discovered that there's a paranormal community worldwide. That there are para people all over this globe, and they have embraced this story with loving arms right from the inception. And the reason that it's known all over the planet right now is because of folks like you. And all I did was Google the word paranormal about 4 years ago when I started thinking, who am I going to present this story to? And I didn't know, because believe me, when we left that farm, this was not a topic of fascination for me. I wanted to move on with my life. We relocated from Rhode Island to Georgia. I started a whole new life and left it behind. And even though I thought about it privately, I never tried to get involved with anyone who might be doing investigations, or I can't even do investigations because I even felt because I bring spirits with me into the venue, and that doesn't work. So, what I did was I utterly internalized the process of my own personal spiritual transformation and thought about it for 3 decades, but never reached out and did not know that there were literally millions of people around the world that are utterly intrigued and immersed in the study of the supernatural. That was the biggest surprise.
And for us, it's great to have someone such as yourself who is so willing to be so open about her experiences and to endure. And you've endured interview after interview, I'm sure, of sharing a lot of the same information. But it's important to get this out there, because somewhere out there, there's another family just like the Perrons having to endure another severe haunting just as bad as this, or if not worse.
There are many. I get thousands of letters, literally thousands of letters from my readers and from people who are in the process of outreach, trying to find someone to answer their questions and provide some guidance. And sometimes some of these letters are absolutely heartbreaking. We are not the only family that endured hardship of this nature. I've never heard of a story, well, even the Warrens always described as the most provocative, intense, significant, and disturbing of all of the investigations that they conducted over a 50-year career of paranormal research. Those were their words, how they described it in one seminar after another. And they said that they did more than 10,000 investigations worldwide over a 50-year career. And on his deathbed, Ed asked Lorraine, while she is still of this earth, find a way to get this story home. And that happened to coincide with me beginning to write the book. Because before I even told anybody in my family that I had begun compiling notes and putting our story down chronologically in a diagram form, before I had even shared that, thinking that there was such reluctance that they kind of cut me off before I even really started. I got my first call from a Hollywood producer, someone who had been in touch with me before, who wanted to tell the story.
Well, thank you so much for the call.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Sorry I got carried away.
Oh, no
I thought I was so
508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. You can also jump in the chat room on SpookySouthcoast.com under the Spooky TV tab. Tweet us at SpookySC or email us SpookyCrew@SpookySouthcoast.com. Here's another call for you. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast with Andrea Perron. Do you have a question for her?
Yes, and I've come to say hello. This is
Hello, Keith.
My brother from another mother.
You just know that. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, sweetie. How are you, darling?
I'm doing fine. How you doing?
Good. How's Sandra?
Oh, she's upstairs asleep, fortunately. She finally got to sleep. We finally got us under sleep, so everybody's sleeping peacefully, and I feel so nice to be alive.
That was my next question. How's Keith doing? You're doing?
He's doing fine. He's doing fine. He has his moments, but he's doing fine, and we're all sticking together as a family.
And that's the name of it, isn't it? Yeah.
And wanted to, of course, comment that a couple of weeks ago, Andrew and I took a ride up to Harrisville because I wanted to show us that Cuba's burial place, and of course the headstone had been fixed up right, and now it's toppled over again, unfortunately. There's been some damage there, some desecration, as always happens there, but it's unfortunate that people have to do this. But anyway, I happened to be recording it, but I was audio recording, and I wasn't asking any questions. I just simply happened to be commenting to Sandra the difference between the headstones there and the concrete stones that are there to hold the cemetery, the wrought iron fence up. And I was showing the difference. And when I take my recording back, you hear me saying that, but then there was a very low male voice that whispers, no, disagrees with me. Now, I don't think that's the voice of Bathsheba, but I do believe that people doing these destructive acts in these cemeteries do bring in negative energy, and that's what affects these kind of contrary spirit voices.
My question, that headstone's right next to Dustin Cummins. I told people in videos and in different posts not to be over dramatic. Just to comment. I don't know who desecrated that.
Oh yeah, he's right there next to us.
I would say, isn't there some question about whether or not she's really buried in that spot?
There is some question about that.
Because isn't there a well on the property that has a big bell-shaped boulder over it?
You really did your homework.
No, actually, I have to give credit to our listener, Chris, who supplied me with a bunch of notes to make sure that I asked. She's like, don't forget to bring this up. Don't forget to bring this up. And she specifically wanted to know what your thoughts were on the matter of Bathsheba's final resting place.
No, I don't know. If you are you know that in past women who have been literally murdered based on an accusation, and Keith knows this, we talked about that, based on the accusation of witchcraft, have been drowned, had their bodies dumped in wells, and had the wells covered with what appears to be a rudimentary gravestone. Mr. McCutcheon had something happening to my mother. Always spoke of that people by dropping the die in the 2 times that I heard him say it. And that's where I recall hearing that there was some question as to whether the church would allow her buried in consecrated ground. And I don't know. I mean, short of the claiming of her body, there's no way to know. I don't want to hear anything about the Riverside Cemetery. I think that that's just next to us alone. That well was abandoned. The well that's way back on the property of the old cellar hole. That well was abandoned years before. But there was some discussion of that.
Yes, and we will never know exactly the exact truth, but what happened, like Andrea said, short of an explanation, but her husband, Judson, was buried right beside her, and of course, his headstone is untouched, and there's still the the biblical epitaph that Andrea touched on, which is mark the upright, the end of man is peace, which is a paraphrase of Psalm 37, verse 37. So, I mean, this is consecrated ground. And I do have that EDC right here, if you'd like it just a few seconds long, if you'd like me to play it to you. Laser just at the headset. Now, did you hear that no? I heard it. Yes, yeah, that's the no. You see the blend. Sounds very much like a male voice, and it's saying no. And again, it's, what a fascinating energy is reputation, vandalism, violence, and I mean, there's just no reason to put something like that. I don't think that the town is going to be under attack. It's just somebody wants to destroy something. And there was a newscast. It was on the TV where they were talking about it at a local station, and I was seeing a local teenage girl, was saying, well, I'm not surprised it was knocked over. After all, she was a witch, and it's almost like justifying it. And it's just sad, this sort of thing is, as we all know, what's going on sometimes with the alleged vampires on Rhode Island, too. They're burial spots, and that's where this negative energy comes from.
It is a shame, too, that people first of all, you can't leave well enough alone anyway. It's bad enough that she was probably falsely accused of being a witch. Right. And now you've got to pile on, even as she's in her final resting place. It's just insane.
I know, it is. It's sickening, it's disgusting. And the fact of the matter is that her life and her history of the story is portrayed in the film. It's not based on the historical record, even though the historical record is fragmented as difficult to put together. What the screenwriters did was weave a tale. They told our story, and I think people agree with me. They told our story in a very broad stroke. But the fine lines of history are written in these 3 volumes, and for all